Gus kameranya di sana. Oh salah.
And would you stay here all day, or will you, would others come to make this lesson? Stay here all day. And they all
pesawat tapi di TPS ini ada 4 saksi dari 4 parpol.
Nah, disediakan di belakang kami. Kami akan segera memulai acara ini.
It's organized thoroughly. We have observers here from 4 of the major parties, all the officials are
Baik tamu atau undangan untuk diri bahwa acara akan kami mulai tepat pukul 8.00.
Mr. President, what is your definition of political maturity?
It was really hard in our hotel, and I'm very grateful.
Sir, how do you define political maturity when judging an election?
The year 2004 comes around, they will be much more politically mature. My guess is that by then there will be a direct election for president, similar to what we do in the United States.
Kepada Bapak
That still has to be.
Ansip, Bapak Sandi khususnya untuk menahan calon pemilih dulu karena
Just
kita
to get out and vote, I've given
sedikit-sedikit dulu, jadi nggak langsung semuanya dulu. Jadi kalian di dalam tidak keluar, kosong.
First of all, to register, and we understand that about 90% of the people registered who are eligible. And today I think some of them will come out and vote and exercise their choice of the next parliamentary leaders and also the next president.
Are you having a good time here?
So far, very good.
Could it be a problem that they're closing so early? Polling stations?
Well, anyone who's in line at 2 o'clock will still be permitted to vote. So if there are 100 people in line at 2, and it takes 2 or 3 hours for them to vote, they'll still be able to vote. So they'll begin opening the box and getting ready at 8. They'll look at
Mr. Carter,
but then we'll, everyone gets here by 2.
Mr. Carter, it is true, much more difficult.
You guys.
How do you feel about the thousands of volunteers who are monitoring also today at the polling station?
Well, this is an unprecedented thing. I've seen a few thousand people who have volunteered to serve as domestic observers. I've never seen 300,000 who have been through training courses and are now dispatched all over the nation. This is an unprecedented commitment, I think, of the Indonesian people to participate in what I hope will be and expect to be very successful.
What do you see as your own role then in this monitoring process?
Well, the international observers, including the Carter Center, National Democratic Institute, and observers from Japan, Australia, and Europe, we don't have any authority ever in the monitoring process. We're here just to observe, to add our comments in the preparations for the election that we've done this. I was here in March and April. And then at the end of the day, to let the world know, I hope and believe this was a completely successful process.
Mr. Are you sure that this election is going to be the milestone in Indonesia?
Well, I think so. I don't believe there's any doubt that the Indonesian people have already demonstrated in a vivid way their commitment to a peaceful and orderly process. When I was here earlier in March and April, there was a great deal of trepidation among Indonesian people as well as foreign observers that when the campaigns began with enormous rallies, there would be confrontations and violence. But it's been amazingly peaceful, which I think shows that the people of Indonesia are committed to the process. I think it shows that they have confidence in the National Election Commission, KPU. There's still some complexities about this election process derived from the 1945 Constitution. Most of the political leaders with whom I've discussed the matter feel that by the time of the next election in 2004, that there might be a direct election of presidents, where the people will vote directly for a certain person to be their leader, rather than going through the parliamentary procedure. But that's still, to be decided by Indonesia.
Are you worried about post-election violence?
No, I think the greatest prospect for violence was obviously when the enormous campaign rallies were scheduled to begin. Everyone was fearful that that might precipitate violence. So I don't think there'd be any chance for post-election violence.
What will you do if the campaign is not running well or is not unfair?
Well, if we have observers in all of the provinces except East Timor. We don't have people in East Timor. In the other 26 provinces, we have observers. They'll be reporting to me all during the day. If there are any irregularities or improprieties or serious mistakes made, if we detect such a problem, then we will go to the authorities, to the National Election Commission members and say there is this problem, and hopefully they will correct it. So we will be quite observant today about the entire process. We'll be participating in a private vote tabulation this evening. We will have a fairly early indication of the returns. It'll be completely unofficial, but it'll be a good check on the final affairs. But I think that it's all been remarkably open and transparent, so that foreign observers and domestic observers and the citizens of Indonesia can understand the procedure.
Do you think that bodes well for investment coming back to Indonesia?
I think the best single factor that can encourage foreign investment to come into Indonesia, the World Bank and IMF to make generous loans and grants, and to have the rich people of Indonesia bring their wealth back into the country, is to have an honest and successful election, yes. If the election is a failure, which I certainly do not anticipate, then I think foreign investors would stay away from here. If the election is fair and honest and free of violence, I think this will be a very good signal that Indonesia is a wonderful place to invest.
Is there anything about this election that stands out as opposed to other elections that your team has covered?
Well, we've been monitors at about 30 elections in the Mideast, Africa, Latin America, and so forth. This is the most complex procedure that I have ever seen.
Why?
It's the country in which we've had the most remarkable outpouring of domestic observers who volunteered to participate, about 300,000 we estimate, who've been through training programs. And I think that this first experiment, with open and free and fair elections in, you might say, 50 years, is the prelude to a much simpler procedure that will be followed 5 years in the future, in 2004. As I said earlier, I think it's quite likely that the Parliament will certainly seriously consider and perhaps adopt a new constitutional provision where the President is elected directly, instead of going through the intermediate step of choosing the National People's Assembly and then having the Assembly members choose the President.
Is there any possibility that
not expecting to win? If they do very well, they can talk about electoral bias, post-election bias.
Well, I really believe, after talking to all the leaders of the major parties, not all 48 parties, that each one has committed to the international observers and to each other that they will accept the results of the election, no matter who wins, if the election procedure is honest and fair. So I think that's the basic answer.
Speaking more about common people reacting, not exactly the
Well, the common people will obviously be committed to varying degrees of intensity to their own favorite candidate. But I think if the major party leaders, including the prominent candidates, say we must accept the results of this election, it has been fair and free, I think that will be the major factor to prevent individual citizens from resorting to violence.
What's been a concern?
Well, it's still of concern in any election. You know, the use of enormous wealth to influence the outcome of the election. But I think that the unprecedented number of domestic observers here, the intense interest of the Indonesian people in this first opportunity for most of them to exercise their citizens' rights will be major factors in preventing an unwarranted degree of vote buying. In almost every country, the incumbent party has an advantage. That is true in Great Britain, it's true in the United States, it's true in Australia, it's true in Switzerland even, where those who are in office have certain, legitimate favors to hand out. But I think this election is going to be very closely watched by both Indonesians primarily and secondarily by Indonesians.
Several party leaders from the opposition since you arrived here. Has anyone expressed any doubt about the election? Have they expressed any fear that it will be rigged?
No serious concerns. There have been a few anomalies, a few concerns about some technicalities. For instance, yesterday, one of the parties, I think the PAN party, found that the color on the ballot was different from what they thought it would be, and would be some confusion with another party. But when the party leaders discussed this among themselves, they said they would accept that error rather than postponing the election. So there'll be a few problems of that kind. And I might say that in every country in which we've monitored elections, there have been a few problems.
Mr. President, it is true is to make the free and free election in development countries like Indonesia. They have to compare with another country.
Well, it's hard to compare yet because, the election process hasn't even begun. But I would guess that the preparations here for the election itself, the goodwill that seems to be shown by all the major party leaders, the great participation by citizens in registering to vote, the large number of observers who have come forward as volunteers, all of this is a good indication that the people of Indonesia are committed to having a good election. Maybe this is the last question.
To be invited in your next general election.
Pada para hadirin yang berada di dalam
election.
Well, that's all up to Indonesian people. I think that President Habibie and some of the party leaders with whom we've met already, Mr. Rice and others, have said they would prefer to have a simpler process in 2004. But that's a decision to be made by the People's National Assembly.
One of the observers from Indonesia. Make it mature in our democracy.
Well, we would be glad to. In fact, in the past, the Carter Center has invited leaders from countries that have not had good elections, to come and witness our own election. For instance, in Mexico used to have unfair elections where one party dominated the process for 50 years. So we invited leaders from Mexico to come and look at our own election process. So I think this is a normal thing for major nations, particularly democracies, to share ideas and to share experiences with each other. I need to go and see them.
Thank you very much.
Fraksi-fraksi atau anggota TPS ataupun saudara-saudara sekalian bersedia disumpah. Untuk yang beragama Islam didahului. Semuanya demi Allah. Demi Allah. Untuk anggota TPS dan saksi, ikuti saya lagi. Saya bersumpah. Khusus untuk anggota KPPS, ikuti saya, saksi, berdiam dulu. Bahwa saya untuk menjadi saksi. Untuk semuanya. Langsung atau tidak langsung, dalam menjalankan tugas, saya akan bekerja dengan jujur, cermat, serta senantiasa akan mendahulukan kepentingan negara Republik Indonesia daripada kepentingan pribadi atau golongan, bahwa saya senantiasa akan menjunjung tinggi amanat pemerintahan rakyat, bahwa saya akan setia dan akan mempertahankan Pancasila sebagai pandangan hidup bangsa, dasar negara dan ideologi nasional, kepada proklamasi 17 Agustus 1945 Undang-Undang Dasar.
He was guessing a million. He was estimating.
Mohon diperhatikan bahwa kotak dalam keadaan kosong. Ya. Diangkat TV. Terima kasih. Mohon diperhatikan bahwa surat suara untuk DPRD tingkat 1 masih dalam keadaan bersegel. Untuk tingkat 2 masih dalam keadaan bersegel. Untuk pusat masih dalam keadaan bersegel juga. Mohon perhatian. Setelah kami membuka kotak suara, ternyata Dan untuk DPRD tingkat 1 dan untuk acara selanjutnya sebagaimana menurut buku petunjuk pemberian suara, ketiga surat-suara tersebut satu demi satu dibuka dan diperiksa. Apabila surat suara kepada ketua. Oke, terima kasih. Ya, kalau begitu saya ini kalau lainnya masih belum. Ya. Nomor 3. Ya, silakan. Ambil peta dulu. Ya.
Udah dari hujan-hujan. Pagi-pagi semua ada yang buka DPS. Saya dulu lah di TPS Pak. Chairman. Congratulations. Oh, thank you. Good luck. Thank you. Thank you.
only been to 3 polling places. They all seem to be well organized. Large number of voters are waiting patiently. The orderly process. I think good spirit, peaceful, but this is only 3 out of several 100,000, so we don't have any way to make a judgment.
How would you say the possibilities for a free and fair presidential election would be, given the system and the time that it takes?
I think it'll be successful because we won't have a president elected in Indonesia until November.
Yeah, I mean that.
Well, it's a long process, but I think the people have already demonstrated their total commitment to having it be successful. For political reasons, for social reasons, for economic reasons.
But I have a system that could sort of change the whole sort of atmosphere of democracy.
I don't think so. I believe this will strengthen the atmosphere presently of democracy because it's a new thing for Indonesians to have democracy.
What about East Timor? The question on East Timor. Could a new president sort of reverse the stand of Habibie on East Timor?
No, that won't be made. That decision won't be made by a new president. It'll be made by the People's National Assembly. And of course, the international observers don't go to East Timor because we don't acknowledge that East Timor is part of Indonesia. As you know, we still look upon it as a colonial part of Portugal. So there will not be any international observers in East Timor, but there are United Nations officials there already preparing for the August the 8th vote on autonomy or independence. Whatever the people vote for, though, will have to be approved by the 700-member People's National Assembly.
What if there's any fraud in the counting of the votes?
Well,
what the Jimmy Carter Center will do?
Well, we would certainly reveal it to the public, but I think the essence of it is that there are 300,000 volunteer domestic observers, and at each polling place there are party observers watching to make sure that everything is done honestly. So I think that any deviations from the rules, any illegalities will be detected and revealed.
Why don't you go to Aceh?
So far, my impression is very good participation by the voters, very well-trained election officials. So far, at least in these 3 places, that's all we visited. All the materials are there. The process is orderly. I don't see any problems so far.
What about the ballots in East Timor? The Jimmy Carter Center is going to be there.
No, we don't participate in East Timor.
Why? Why?
Because the United Nations and the U.S. government does not recognize East Timor as being part of Indonesia. We don't acknowledge the legitimacy of the taking of East Timor in past times. But as you know, there are negotiations underway between Indonesia, Portugal, and the United Nations, and East Timor will be voting today. There are many domestic observers in East Timor, but that's one province where we will not participate. The Carter Center has observers in other 26 provinces, but not in East Timor.
What about in Aceh?
Why don't you go to Aceh?
There's
Well, the Carter Center has observers in Aceh. We have observers there.
How many?
But you say that you are not the representative U.S. government.
I represent the Carter Center.
He's not ruler because government is still make election in East Timor.
Well, that's a decision for Indonesia to make, but the United Nations and other foreign countries have never recognized that East Timor is part of Indonesia.
Is it according to your government or according to your center, your foundation?
Well, it's part of the international community, so all the international observers are not going to East Timor. But we go to other 26 provinces.
But you want peace to be created in East Timor?
Of course, yeah, and there are United Nations observers and peacekeepers in East Timor, and I think it'll be very successful. And then, of course, the vote on August the 8th will determine what the East Timor people want, and then the National People's Assembly will decide on the future status of East Timor.